Welcome to The Favorites, the podcast presented by Bet365. We are part of the Volume Podcast Network. I am Chad Millman, Chief Content Officer of the Action Network. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my companion, my compadre, my BFF professional bettor, Simon Hunter. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Chad. How we doing, brother?
We are living it. We are deep into preview season. I'm excited for today's because it involves the most smug, arrogant, controversial player in the NFL. It's our fifth installment in our annual NFL division preview series. We are discussing the AFC East, and we are joined by a special guest who has had his fair share of controversial characters that he has had to work with. He is a longtime NFL executive, creator of the Daily Coach newsletter, author, host of the GM Shuffle podcast. It is Michael Lombardi. Mr. Lombardi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Simon. Appreciate being here. I enjoy listening to you guys talk about the game and talking about the betting. It's, as I told Simon when we had lunch one day, for me, somebody who's never been in the betting world and working at VSiN, I never really understood betting, and listening to how it applies to handicapping teams. I've learned a great deal from listening to you too. So it's helped me out a lot. I appreciate you having me.
I love that we've got an old school South Jersey, Jersey Shore barn burner on this show. And also, look, for those listening who don't know, Lombardi worked for Al Davis. And I sat with Mike and he's told me stories about working for Al Davis that would burn your eyeballs. How
Yeah.
insane it was to work with Al Davis. So you are no stranger to working with controversial characters, to working with people who have big egos. Aaron Rodgers, obviously in the AFC East. We're going to get into that. As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays. And they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Also, quick heads up. Action Network's popular college football podcast, BBOC, now has its own YouTube channel. Head to the BBOC channel on YouTube. Subscribe for early access to the best college football betting coverage anywhere, or follow the link in this episode description. Before we get into it, Mike, truly, did you have a secret? And now you've been in media, so you've continued to deal with arrogant, controversial, crazy personalities.
Yeah.
Between working for the Raiders, working for the Patriots, what was your secret to dealing with unbelievably sort of high touch, precious personalities?
When I watched Hard Knocks, I thought Joe Shane's the luckiest son of a bitch in the world, because John Mara is such a nice man that if Al Davis would have been his president and general manager, I don't think Joe Shane would have been alive today. He would have been like Mussolini, hung out in some square, because some of the answers that he was giving weren't going to fly with Al. I think it the other way. I've learned a lot from him. I learned a lot of football from Al. I was a young kid driving Bill Walsh around in a car, and Coach Walsh said to me, he said, the most football I ever learned in my life was working for Al Davis. And I thought to myself, well, I got to go work for Al Davis. And I did. And I learned a lot of football. I learned about game management. I learned about players. Like, for example, if I would have gone to Al and said, we're going to spend $28 million and trade for Brian Burns, and he's got 8.5 sacks this year, and we're going to cost us a 2 and a 5, he would have said, well, how many sacks did he get against Tyron Smith? How many sacks did he get against Charles Leno? How many sacks did he get against Mulata from the Eagles? And if I didn't have that answer off the top of my head, he would have cursed me out and I would have been shot at sunrise. So it's a blessing to work for some of these people. Ego is just part of it. It just goes with the territory. And as long as your ego doesn't get in the way of you learning, it's really beneficial.
I think I might have told you this story, Mike. I don't know, Simon, if I've ever told you this story, but Al Davis, so he used to be a coach at the Citadel, going back to the 50s and 60s, and before he was, in the NFL. And one of my closest friends, his dad grew up dirt poor in Brooklyn, had never been to a restaurant, but he was an all city football player in Brooklyn. So Al Davis was recruiting him to go to the Citadel. And Al Davis took him to a really nice restaurant in New York, the only restaurant he'd ever been to that had tablecloths on it, right? On the table. So he's sitting with Al Davis, and in the middle of dinner, Al Davis takes out a pen on the tablecloth, the white tablecloth, starts drawing up plays for this guy to diagram, break down, talk about. And then again, nice restaurant, coat and tie kind of place, white tablecloths. Al Davis gets up out of his seat and gets into a stance and tells my buddy's father to get into a stance so they can start like blocking with each other and practicing so he can see his technique in the middle of the restaurant. My buddy's father thought this is just what you did in a restaurant. That to me is when I think about Al Davis, Mike, that is what I think about.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of them. I mean, I met with a publisher in New York City. Michael Lewis, the writer, lived behind me in Berkeley when I worked for the Raiders. And when I got done working for the Raiders, as Al Davis would often say, I'm going to send you to Elba, which is where Napoleon went when they put him out of power. He was always saying that, kid, I'm going to put you in Elba. And so eventually I went to Elba to meet Michael Lewis, and he says, you got to meet my publisher, Star Lawrence. He's in New York. You should write a book about Al and all that stuff. And I did. So I'm sitting with Star and I'm telling Star Lawrence all these stories. And he looks at me and he says, no one's going to believe this. Like, no one could possibly believe these stories. Like, I get your ideas, but there's not a book here because it's going to be a novel. And he was probably right. I mean, that story doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, there's so many of them. But again, that side of Al was what people know, but the brilliance of him as an executive, as a drafter, I mean, he signed Lance Rensel on the field at the University of Arkansas, made him sign the contract at the 50-yard line. I mean, this guy was the whole history of the AFL. And one of the reasons why the Chiefs and the Raiders have such hostility towards one another, I don't think people realize this. I wrote about it in Football Done Right. Al was the commissioner of the AFL. And meanwhile, Lamar Hunt and Tex Schramm were negotiating the settlement between the AFL and the NFL, and they didn't tell Al. And Lamar signed the contract without telling him. And that burned his ass forever.
Mike, here at the Favorites, we also pride ourselves on our commitment to excellence. So let's get into it. Let's get into the AFC East. Reminder for everybody who's been listening, in all of our previous installments, 19 of the past 21 seasons, an NFL team has gone from worst to first in its division. Last year's AFC champ was the Buffalo Bills. Last place, New England Patriots. Could the Patriots be that team? Could the Patriots be that team that goes from worst to first? All right, Buffalo, 15-1 to win the Super Bowl. A little bit lower than it's been in the past, a little bit longer than it's been in the past couple of years. Plus 170 to win the division. 10.5 is the win total. As everybody knows, our strength of schedule ranking goes by the aggregate wins in 2024 from the projections of bookmakers. That's how we are ranking a schedule. Buffalo has the 10th hardest. Also, as everybody knows, we focus a lot on O-line and D-line because that's where we think differences are made far beyond anybody gives credit when we're talking about power rankings. O-line ranking for the Bills, 8th. A lot of questions, though. Their best player is Spencer Brown, who was the 32nd ranked tackle, according to Pro Football Focus. They are replacing their center, filling a lot of other holes. D-line ranking, very quiet, 16th. Traded for Von Miller. He has not been right ever since they traded for him. He's faded. Ed Oliver is mid at best. Mike, I'm going to start with you. Do you feel like the Bills have just completely missed their window?
Well, that window thing's always fascinating to me because when you have Josh Allen, you always have a big window. But I think this is a team that has to be, if you were to bring in Brandon Beane or Sean McDermott into this conversation today, they would tell you they're worried about their defensive front. They're worried that they paid all this money to Von Miller. He didn't have a sack or an assist last year. No, he's coming off the injury. But, they're worried about the size of their team. See, Buffalo's an interesting team, guys, because Buffalo believes in the concept of we're going to get the lead in football. Everybody thinks the West Coast offense is about smash 7 curl, 20 bingo cross. Walsh invented an offense that could score early in the game and then have a defense that could rush the passer. And that's what Buffalo is. Buffalo's a nickel defense. When you have Matt Milano and you have Bernard, two guys that barely weigh 225 pounds playing linebacker for you, you're going to have a hard time holding up against the run in a tight game. But when you play from in front, they can rush the passer. And that's the issue, I think, for Buffalo is their defensive front. Can they rush? Are they going to be good enough up front? Daquan Jones was their best defensive lineman last year, the way I see it. And he got hurt and they missed some games. There's no real depth here. Miller doesn't look anywhere near the same player. So when they have that lead, who's going to really be the guy to rush? Who's going to be their defensive player? I worry about that. Allen will keep them in games. They didn't lose a game by more than 6 points all last year. But to me, that's my biggest concern.
Simon, no value on this team.
Actually, you're going to be shocked. I'm fine to be positive about a division. I love this division, and I like 3 teams in this division. So Buffalo is one of the teams I like. If you're telling me that, this is the year people started doubting him because they got rid of his 2 receivers, that's the year I buy. It was the same thing with the Chiefs. The Chiefs got rid of Tyreek Hill, Chad. I was buying heavy on that team because I just kept saying he's important, but they have some of the best minds in football they'll be able to adjust. Is Joe Brady still the offensive coordinator? I'm in then. I love him. I love their style. And this is a team that I just bought into last year. And me and you rode them I think we got them at plus 400 to win the division. And we just saw the path. We saw how it could break for them last year because the offense started clicking, right? Once they made a change at coordinator, it really started clicking. I just believe having an offseason now, Kincaid might be one of the best tight ends. We're not talking about football. Like this kid's ceiling might be really high. He might be the next type Kittle type, right? He might be a great blocking tight end who's also a dominant receiver. So there's a lot of things I'm excited about. Stuff you hear out of camp sounds great, right? Coleman, the kid they drafted this year out of Florida State. He's funny as hell, but when he gets on the field, he seems like he's a dog. Like he's really serious and he works really hard apparently. And he's been working, putting extra time with Josh Allen. So to me, Josh, he's the difference maker, Chad. I mean, me and you keep talking about we have him as second-ranked quarterback. I can't bet an under on a guy like that I respect. So 10.5 is plus 130. The professionals clearly like this team's under because they believe this division is better, right? With Aaron Rodgers stepping up and Miami ascending from last year. I can see why they've taken that position. Again, they play a first-place schedule. It's tough to get those wins when you have a first-place schedule. I got them right at 11 wins, Chad. So it's not that big of an advantage. I got it by half a game. But at a plus number, I'll take that bet. But I haven't bet anything on division wise yet, Chad. I have not touched their division odds yet at plus 170. I think it should be closer to plus 200, just like the Jets, right? I kind of have these teams right there by each other. So to me, I've not taken a position on the Bills division odds yet, but I have bet the over at 10.5.
So Mike can appreciate this. You just mentioned their schedule, by the way. On the road, at Baltimore, at Houston, at the Jets, at the Rams, at Detroit, plus Kansas City and the Niners at home.
It's brutal.
This is not a schedule that is for the faint of heart. I feel like Matt Mitchell was listening to this as our resident Buffalo Bills maniac and the king of Bills Mafia and the godfather of Bills Mafia. He knows that this is going to be a miserable year to be a Buffalo Bills fan. Mike, I was making notes on this and I was trying to think like Josh Allen, transcendent talent, happens to have the bad luck of being a transcendent talent at the same time as Patrick Mahomes is not only in the same league, but in the same conference. So I was trying to think of comps for the Bills. And in my notes, I was like, is he Dan Fouts of the Chargers? or in the 80s when they couldn't get over the hump, right? Or is it
Philip
like
Rivers are the Chargers. Philip
or
Rivers,
Philip
he
Rivers?
couldn't
Well,
get over the Peyton Manning,
but
Tom Brady hump.
Simon, we'll get to this in a second because you'll like this too. Or is it the Houston Oilers of the 70s and like they got to those championship games and they couldn't quite get past the Steelers. And so Mike knows this because like we are of the same generation of football fandom where those teams like are, it feels like yesterday. So I'm sitting at the dinner table with my kid and I say to him, give me a comp for Josh Allen today. My kid is 17, Mike. Give me a comp for Josh Allen in a sport where like he's the best, but might not get there. And he goes, well, James Harden of the Rockets. And I'm like, huh, that could be better than Dan Fouts of the 1980s for our audience. But you're with me, Mike. You're with me.
Well, I think to me, all those teams you cited, like I think the Houston Oilers were the most talented team to never win a Super Bowl. I think Mike Hollaback, the former general manager, belongs in the Hall of Fame for the assemblance of that team. I wrote about that, but this isn't that talented of a team that way. I think they've changed their style offensively. Look, they gave the Chiefs the hardest time of any team in the playoff run, even worse than the 49. They ran for 173. They threw the football effectively on them. Bass missed a field goal. That Bass is an issue that you have to be concerned about with this team. He's missed 2 kicks in the 40. He missed 2 outside of 50. They kick in Buffalo, not easy to kick. You have to be worried about that. But they changed who they are, guys. I think they used to be an 11 team all the time, 1 tight end, 1 back. And now they're a 12 team. But how you define 12 is different. See, Kincaid can win against slot corners. Kincaid can win against other safeties. So they're really they're a little bit like the Patriots. When the Patriots had Hernandez, they were a 12 team, but they could be an 11 team. They could be a 10 team without having to substitute. And this is a little bit where Buffalo is in that vein. They can be an 11 team or a 12 team without a substitution, which makes it harder for the defensive coordinator to game plan against. It also, because of the value of Cook, we can't underestimate Cook's talent as a runner. Now, he fumbled 4 times last year, but Cook's really good. And so he makes the spread. And what Simon's saying about Brady is they can be in that. And I think their leading receiver will be Kincaid. I don't think the Diggs trade is going to affect them as much because of this is how they've actually changed the offense. And they changed it last year right before our eyes.
So I'm glad you guys are saying this because one of the other notes I had is I don't know that I get the identity for this team right now. Are they going to be the team that was trying to run, run, run? Are they going to be the team that is spreading it out? Are they going to be the team whose best weapon is going to be whatever Josh Allen decides he wants to be that day without any rhyme or reason? Either he's the best rusher on the field, the best passer on the field. We're going to bet his over rushing props in every game. So this is interesting to me. And Simon, I agree with you. Like when you were saying 10.5, I was thinking to myself, if I'm betting the Bills 10.5, why wouldn't I just bet the plus 170 at a better number? Because they'll need to get over 10.5 to win that division. But you kind of framed it that you don't think the value is there.
Yeah, I just wish it was a better number. Again, they deserve to have a lower number. They should have the most respect in this division. It's their division. I mean, they've won it how many times now with Josh Allen? 4 or 5 times, Chad. I mean, it's his division. So they should be the favorite. I just thought it'd be closer to plus 200 than it is at plus 170.
All right. New York Jets. I'm fairly certain that the Atlantic winds have floated a rumor to me that you guys might have different opinions here. New York Jets, 20-1 to win the Super Bowl, plus 180 to win the division, season win total of 9.5. 4th easiest schedule. And I will not lie to you guys. I don't like Aaron Rodgers at all as a personality. I don't know him. I think he's a brilliant quarterback. I just don't like the way he presents himself as a personality. I think he's just way too smug, tries to use wordplay to get himself to thread the needle so he can be right no matter what he says. I just think it's obnoxious. But their offensive and defensive line, how they can control the line of scrimmage, their foundation, that's just, it might be too good to bet against the Gents. O-line ranked, according to Pro Football Focus, is 5th. They signed Tyron Smith. They signed Morgan Moses. Both finished among the 10th highest graded offensive tackles in 2023. Could be one of the best duos in 2024. They also get Elijah Vera Tucker, who missed most of 2023. He's going to be back. And then their defensive line, like even with a couple of departures of John Franklin Myers and Bryce Huff, they were hopefully offset by Hassan Reddick, depending on what happens with his contract situation. Jermaine Johnson showed improvement. Then there's Quinnen Williams, who was obviously, other than Chris Jones and Dexter Lawrence, the most dominant interior defender in the league, behind both of them only for total pressures amongst interior linemen for the past 2 seasons. Simon, I want to bet against the Jets. I don't want to root for Aaron Rodgers, but I look at the overall of this team. I look at their foundation, and I can't do it. I like them.
And I'm not here to convince people to like Aaron Rodgers, but you have to see this kid where he's come from is he went to JUCO. And when he was in college, apparently he said people basically told him he was going to be dumb and a failure in life. And he is what we talked about. He just likes revenge. Like this guy likes to prove people wrong, and he's very vindictive. And, him dropping in the draft, he talked about like that changed his trajectory in life. Like he worked so hard because he was just like, once again, people didn't believe in me and all these other people. I get where you're coming from. That's what made him is that personality though, where he's totally gone the other way because it has worked out for him, Chad, right? So it's like he does think his shit don't stink when it does stink. It's like he ain't the smartest man in the room just because he's incredibly gifted at football. But for this season, it's all there. Like it's perfectly set up where they have the schedule. And I do think, even if, things don't work out with Reddick, I still trust that defense. I just think overall they have the talent there. And then offensively, it's just, fantasy people know this. Right now, Breece Hall and, Wilson are both first round picks in fantasy football. These guys' ceilings are, Hall could be the number one running back in football at the end of the season. And we've seen Rodgers' career, he likes to lock on the number one targets. It's just his playing style. He always finds a guy he likes and trusts. He doesn't care if that guy's doubled. He's going to try to fit it in there and trust and put that on the guy. We just saw Garrett Wilson have an incredible season with Zach Wilson. It's just, I just can't get over how much potential is there. And then we mix in the schedule, Chad. We already talked about, even if they lose that first game this year, we could easily see them rattle off 5 wins afterwards and be 5-1 heading into mid-October. So this is the team that it's all set up for them. And even if Rodgers does go down with an injury, I told you I like the fact they picked up Tyrod Taylor. It's like they picked up just the robot, like the guy that they know can run a very boring, anemic offense. Because I won't lie to you, Chad, I do not trust these other teams in this division. Like that's my biggest pause with them right now is the coaching. I just don't know if offensively, don't trust it, and defensively, I don't know how much faith I have right now. So this is a team where I get your hesitation, but a 9.5. I'll take it. And you can actually take this because it's minus 159.5. If you want a plus number, I have no issue taking a 10.5 bet with this team either. Because it's just another team I really like their win total. So if you just want, you're going to tie up money for 6 months here, you want to make sure it's plus money, do the 10.5. I've done it at plus 135, plus 140. So this is a team that, I hate like we talk about all the time, Chad. This is a media darling, right? This is a team that will be all hype just because the Jets have had nothing to hold on to since Mark Sanchez. And like you'll never hear a louder market that's done nothing in 12 years. It's crazy that the Jets fan base. So I get that it's chalky, people, but I do think it's all lined up perfectly for this team. Like last place schedule in a division that, those games matter. You just talking about the Bills have a brutal schedule. The Jets will benefit playing from a much easier schedule.
Mike, you spent years in this division.
Well,
bring some Jersey Shore reality to Simon.
Well, I call them on my show and on my podcast, I call them the ifers, because everything that Simon said, if they're healthy, it's true. They're the ifers. What Aaron Rodgers are we getting? Are we getting the Aaron Rodgers from the last year in Green Bay? Or are we getting the Aaron Rodgers from the MVP seasons? I don't know that. I've never seen a guy come off the Achilles and play to the same level. Now, the procedure he had on the Achilles, if you talk to medical people about that procedure, they say it allows you to come back quickly. However, the propensity for re-injury is there. right? So you can rehab quicker, but there is a propensity for that. All right. So you worry about that. Tyrod Taylor is always injured. I mean, he's going to play a couple of games. He's going to get hurt. They do have a backup. You know, I don't agree with them being the fifth best offensive line in football. I haven't seen it yet. I mean, Tyron Smith is always hurt. Morgan Moses is always on the ground. Tucker's coming off an ACL. Tippmann and Simpson are just average players so far. So maybe when if they get going, they're the fifth best line. I can't say that. I think Bryce Hall is remarkable for gaining 800 yards behind that really, really bad offensive line that they had last year with all those backups in it. So, and Mike Williams is another iffer. The guy's been trending on the downward slide in Los Angeles, even though he's got great big playability. Can he stay healthy? So if you're betting against him, you're saying not all these things are going to come to fruition. And you're also saying what Simon said, Robert Saleh is leading this team. And, you know, I don't know who sends him out to a press conference, but obviously he doesn't have anybody talking to him before he talks about the team. You know, everything's always in disarray. The strength of the team is their defense, but I think Bryce Hall was really good for him last year. I think John Franklin Myers was really good for him last year. And I think, to me, they haven't really replaced those two players. I think they were the two best defensive players. But I agree with your logic to bet over, because if all this comes in, you got it. But there's a propensity for it might not happen.
When does it happen? When in the NFL does everything work out exactly as you need it to, especially when the quarterback is 40 years old, coming off a full missed season with an Achilles injury? And to your point, Mike, people will remember a couple of great years with LaFleur, but they will forget that for 3 of those, I think 5 years he played with LaFleur, he was on the downward trend. So
yes,
it is like, now all of a sudden, I don't really like Simon's take. I think I like your take better, because
well,
so
here's
much
the other
has to
thing about
happen.
your strength of schedule. Your strength of schedule, like for me being in the league, I never really gave much thought to the scheduling, because it was about what quarterback are we playing, and if the team's not healthy at quarterback, that's an easier game. So, but one thing about the Jets and the strength of schedule, because of the media reaction, because of Aaron Rodgers, they'll be everybody's Super Bowl. No one's going to take them lightly. Like, no one's saying, "Hey, we got the Jets this week, no big game." But the bad teams are saying, "Hey, we got the Jets this week. We got if we show up to the Jets, we're good." See, that's a whole different. You go from being the hunter to the hunted. It's a different game. And, you know, that's why the NFL is so hard to handicap all the time, because you can't always understand the emotions that go on in locker rooms. The Jets, like the first game, they're what? I think it's 5.5. It's gone down to 4.5. It's jockeyed around
Yeah.
based on the 49ers and the Ayuk situation. But to me, that's a good matchup for the Jets, because their front will get the 49ers offensive line without Trent Williams. They play from in front, all that. But after that game, they're always going to be somebody's target.
I think this is the most fascinating team to think about betting in the NFL. It's lined just a little bit high to make you nervous about betting the over 9.5, because it's all on the if. It's all on if Aaron Rodgers is good. It's all on if Tyron Smith can be healthy for a full season and be as dominant as he was in his prime with the Cowboys. It's all, can Breece Hall make that leap in the second year after an ACL injury? Like, it's a fascinating team. And to your point about coaches, nobody's got confidence in these coaches. Let me give you a stat about Nathaniel Hackett. He's in his second year as offensive coordinator with the Jets, 11th as a coach or offensive coordinator. In those previous 10 seasons, his teams were 93-78 to the under, going 500 or better to the under for all five teams he's been a part of. I don't think we can expect this to be an explosive Aaron Rodgers offense, which means their defense is going to have to win, because these games are going to be low scoring, which speaks even more to the power of what we're saying about their defense. Simon, are you still on the Jets?
Yeah, I like to bet the upside of it, where it's all there. Where, yeah, we're talking, week to week, this is the team that we might not be on just because they're overvalued. But I think long term, yeah, it's just, this bet could be dead by, early November, which is no worries. It's like, all right, well, swing and a miss. It's the damn Jets. But if it's not this year, Chad, I feel bad for these fans because it's going to be a dark 4 or 5 years ahead of them. I mean, they've really gone boom or bust with this team.
The schedule is what the schedule is. Mike makes a good point about how you look at it in season, and we're both all aligned that it plays to the benefit of the Jets. But for the record, they will play 6 night games. Again, to Mike's point that everyone is aware that Aaron Rodgers is playing for the Jets and the NFL wants to put them in prime time. 6 night games and a game in London without a bye. No other team plays more than 4 night games in the first 11 weeks. In the last 20 years, the Jets 6 night games within the first 11 weeks, the most by any team in the NFL. So even if it's an easier schedule, the actual scheduling doesn't do them any favors. The Jets, however, at the Niners, as Mike said, they will be one of the teams that we play in week 1. There's no doubt about it. Miami Dolphins, 22-1 to win the Super Bowl, plus 200 to win the division. 9.5 is the total. Strength of schedule, 8th easiest. O-line rank, middling, 18th, according to PFF. You could argue that this O-line, it's a perfect reflection of this team. Better than it looks because of the system. They don't have to hold their blocks because Tua gets the ball out so quickly, thanks to Mike McDaniel's scheme, which, by the way, makes Tua look better as well. D-line rank, 25th. This is a problem, and not in a good Myles Garrett is a problem kind of way. This is just a problem. Christian Wilkins, best player, left in free agency. Andrew Van Ginkel had a career year. He left. Bradley Chubb was supposed to be an edge rusher, game changer, still recovering from the Week 17 ACL. We don't know when he'll play. Mike, Tua just got a bag. I feel like this team is in a position where it's never going to be a contender. It's a middle of the road team.
Well, I think there's a couple factors going on here. He's the only quarterback really in the league when you study that's still effective in the RPO game. The RPO game is dying. I mean, you look at Jalen Hurts' numbers in the RPO game from 2 years ago to last year, it's gone significantly down, almost by 500 yards. This kid's that's his strength, the RPO game. And you've eloquently said it perfectly. He is enhanced by the system, by the skill around him. But the second half of the season, with the skill and the system around them, have been a failure for the Miami Dolphins. They're 4-10 the second half of the season with Mike McDaniel over the last 14 games. Okay. Tua last year throws 11 touchdowns, 7 interceptions the second half of the season. Same system, same players, all those things. And now you add in the flavor that, he's got a contract. He had 13 fumbles last year in the quarterback pocket. He's much skinnier than he was the year before. The concussion protocol is still in play for him. One of the reasons why he wanted a new contract, because he wanted to make sure that he got that done. And we've yet to see them beat a good football team ever under Tua's leadership. I mean, the Eagles, and Simon, you're an Eagle fan, you know this as well as anybody. They were not good on defense, and they shut down Miami's offense. Because why? Because good defensive coaches understand how to play Miami. You play the RPO game. The balls are going to certain spots. Now, it's easier said than done because Hill's an incredibly gifted player, unlike any we've ever seen before. He's got Barry Sanders' quickness with Brandy Moss' speed. Those are hard things to put together. But I'm not a fan because I think at some point there has to be a level of toughness. I think at some point there has to be a defense that can take and win the game. And when I read all the comments that they said about Vic Fangio when he left, it tells me this is more of a softer team, and the evidence supports it. So I'm not buying it. Wins on PUP. Brewer got hurt yesterday, their offensive lineman. I think this is a team that everybody got paid, but nobody's going to be happy.
That's a great NFL line right there.
Yeah, this was a team I wanted to like, Chad. Like they're really fun, exciting, like we said on offense, and they kept all the guys together. But when you really do go into what they let go on defense last year, again, arguably the best D tackle in football. How do you not pay that, man? That's a position you just pay. You suck up and you pay that position just because it's such a key anchor to that defense. So the fact that he's gone, Fangs is now up in Philly coaching, like that's a big loss for them on defense. He held a lot together on that defense last year. And to me, this is a team that it's easy to bet their regression, right? It felt like a lot of things broke their way last year. They had a lot of really crazy close wins. I mean, even week one, that Chargers game was just a back and forth shootout. They kept winning those kind of games, right? And that's why we kind of, grew to respect this, offense. It's like Tua, I agree. He's probably slightly overpaid. He's right for this offense. Like what he does, those 1-2 reads, that's what he is. He's a first or second read quarterback that gets the ball out of his hands. Whether it's there or not, he's going to let his receivers do their jobs just because he has 2 top 25 receivers. So it's like, all right, if Tyreek Hill's covered, double covered here or bracketed, I'll just go to Watt on the single coverage. It's not that complicated of an offense, especially when we're talking about the RPOs, which is always going to have the offense open the middle up just because the linebackers are always stepping up, just in case, they do hand the ball off, which I know it sounds crazy. Their best offense is when they do run the ball. Like if you go back and look through their history of the games, that's when they're so dominant. That's my issue with this team this year. They're not going to have the defense to have games where they can just run the ball. It feels like they're always going to be chasing points just because they're always going to be kind of behind because of this defense. So 9.5 is rich. Like I got them right at 9 wins. So I don't really have a bet either side. I'd probably lean towards the under here. Division odds are terrible. Plus 200. In what world would you bet this? It's just, to me, it's either the Bills or the Jets. I'm shocked when Chad said the Jets were down to plus 180. They were plus 230 a month ago, so that they've been hit pretty hard now these last couple of weeks. This Miami team, I don't know who's betting them. I just don't know who would believe in this team to win this division, let alone put any type of money on Super Bowl futures. Like when no matter what, they're having to go to somewhere cold to win a playoff game. Doesn't matter if it's Baltimore, doesn't matter if it's Cincy, doesn't matter if Buffalo, like the Chiefs. It's all bad right there. So to me, that's a bad bet if you're typing any type of future on a team. This is one I've not even thought about at all. It just does not line up right for them. But like I said, if you're the owner of the team and you just want to have 9 to 10 wins every year, congrats, you built that team. Like that's what this team feels like they're going to be for the next 4 to 5 years. They're always going to be in it, but no one is going to ever have faith in them actually going doing anything with this team. So yeah, it's tough if you're a fan of the team, you have high hopes, but as a bettor here, to be really honest, Chad, there's nothing here I really want to invest in on this team.
You guys both pointed out, Tua was kind of a beat up on bad teams, win at home, flashy, mile wide, inch deep as a quarterback. 2-10 straight up, 3-8-1 against the spread away from home versus winning teams in his career. His last straight up win came in September of 2022 against the Ravens. So that's 7 consecutive losses. And I think we all remember that game. Crazy hot. It's one of those early season games that it's really challenging for the opposing team. Looking at the Dolphins schedule, Miami is projected to play away from home versus a winning team potentially in week 3 against the Seahawks, week 9 versus the Bills, week 10 versus the Rams, week 13 versus the Packers, week 15 versus the Texans, week 17 versus the Browns, week 18 against the Jets. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 potential games against winning teams over the course of the season. That does not bode well for this team at all.
No, and again,
they're
that's
not built
just
for cold weather. They're not
no.
built.
That's that's what I picked up when you said a bunch of those are cold weather games.
Yeah, I mean, look, he struggles. Go back to Tennessee. Played Tennessee 3 years ago, and the first quarter it looked really good. It started to rain in Tennessee, 45 degrees and rain. His hands are small. He can't control the ball in bad weather. I mean, it's perfect conditions. He's good. Look, they got Tyreek Hill. Can he stay healthy for all 17? I don't know. Armstead, the left tackle, can't stay healthy for a game, let alone all 17 games. So, Isaiah wins on PUP. And, of course, you haven't mentioned, Chad, they have the great Odell Beckham, which is guaranteed you to get bet by everybody. I mean, Odell's the greatest receiver that ever played. I mean, people are going to put him in the Hall of Fame. But at some point, what we've learned is you could talk all the offense you want. Kansas City won last year with their defense. Let's make no bones about it. They have the greatest quarterback. Don't get me wrong. They won with defense. They were able to stay in games with their defense, and I don't see it. You know, they signed Jordan Poyer, who's going to have a hard time staying healthy. Ramsey's a good corner, but everybody's going to throw on Kendall Fuller. You know, where's the rush? Calais Campbell actually was Atlanta's best defensive lineman. He had 19 quarterback pressures last year. So he comes in, but you expect him to fill in for Wilkins, who's they made no attempt to sign Wilkins at all, which I thought was ridiculous.
You know, Calais Campbell, Mike, I think he played for that 1970s Oilers team.
Yeah,
That's how long he's been around. B, Ramsey, he's on the PUP list too. Like, we don't know when he's going to be coming back from his injury last year. So that defense is in shambles. You're the GM of this team. As Simon and I, as generally laymen, me more than Simon, could see from a mile away, this team was building itself towards mediocrity. What do you do with Tua if you're the GM of that team? Do you feel like they've handicapped themselves? Like, how are you building a team to escape the inertia of 8 to 10 wins?
I'm waiting for a team to have enough balls when they know who their quarterback is to draft a quarterback and have the balls to replace them. See, I think the biggest mistake I made it in the league, we all make it, is when we overpay replaceable players. Right. Look, I'm not saying Tua's not a good player, but he's certainly, if they went to Mike White or Skylar Thompson, they would be a lesser player. But maybe if they drafted one, I think to me, when you go down that road of overpaying good players, you end up with a bad cap and not a good team. Daniel Jones, the perfect example. I mean, this is a team, the Giants, 36% win percentage since Tom Coughlin left. But you talk to John Mara, and he'll say Daniel Jones is a really good player. Well, you overpay for good. You can never overpay for great. You're never overpaying Patrick Mahomes. You're not overpaying Josh Allen. But you're going to overpay Brandon Ayuk because the media wants you to overpay him because he thinks he's a top 5 receiver when yet his numbers are not the same as DJ Moore, who makes $27.5 million. That's where you get in trouble with the cap. And I think that's where Miami is. Now, they've paid no attention to the offensive and defensive lines, which to me is the essence of how you win championships.
Isn't it interesting, just to go back to the GM thing for 1 second? I watched the Hard Knocks with the Giants, and I thought their GM in those early couple of episodes about Saquon Barkley, they tried to frame him as being a little bit out of his depth, when in fact, he very well may be on the right side of history here because that offensive line was so bad. And if you've invested in Daniel Jones, you basically have this season to figure out, is he any good or not? You can't overspend on Saquon and not do anything to improve the offensive line, which, by the way, it's why we look at offensive and defensive line rankings when we're doing these previews. But Mike, from your point of view, when you saw how Joe Shine was managing that situation and came across in Hard Knocks, was that a nightmare for you as a GM? Did you think, oh, he's managing this well? What was your take on that?
I thought he managed like somebody at Biggie Sports Bar up in North Jersey. I thought he hurt our profession in the sense that that's not how it should be run. There should be models. If we sign Brian Burns and pay this is what our team looks like. If we don't, we sign these 5 players. This is what our team looks like. It's never about one thing. And he's talked about what you said, I agreed with, offensive line. But signing Jermaine Illuminor if he's your best top offensive lineman, you better go back to your pro personnel guys and say, wait a minute, something's wrong here. This guy's been on 6 teams. He's our best player. And then they sign Runyon, and that's it. See, everything the Giants have done is always about protecting their draft picks. Evan Neal is still on PUP, can't play. They need a right. So now Illuminor's playing right tackle. So they signed Van Note, now they have the Raiders' right side of the line of last year. How do you think that's going to work out for them? So for me, what I had a real issue with, I learned this from the Giants because of Belichick and because of everything, Parcells. There's no identity there. We don't know who they are. I want a general manager to walk in and say, this is who we are. We're going to rebuild. We're going to build a deep. Like I would have signed Christian Wilkins and paid whatever it took, then sign Brian Burns, because with Lawrence and Wilkins inside, now Jalen Hurts is going to have to run around the pocket. Let me ask you both this question. Did you ever hear them ever say, how are we going to beat Dallas? How are we going to beat Philly?
Never.
Al Davis would have gone berserk Not once did they ever mention it. Al Davis would have gone berserk by not hearing that. So for me, it was a little too fandom for me, because I take great pride in the profession, but it's not about what players should we sign. It's how are we going to build this team?
I love that. New England, 180 to 1 to win the Super Bowl, 25 to 1 plus 2,500 to win the division.
You know what I call those odds? Those are St. Jude's plays, Chad. Give the money to St. Jude's. Give the money to St. Jude's, right? Give the money. Those kids at St. Jude's are fighting, and we should help them. Don't waste your money on the Patriots. Give it to St. Jude's.
It's only people out on Route 1 who are betting those numbers.
I don't think they are.
And the win total is 4.5. Combine this with the second hardest schedule, an O-line rank of 28th, a D-line rank of 15th. Simon, what I do know is that we're going to bet the Patriots in week 1. After that, I pretty much think we're out.
Again, though, it has to be Brissett, but yeah, they're already having a disaster camp where I think their best D tackle has like blood clots or something like that, and he came in.
Barmore, he's out for the year. Yeah,
and if you watch his tape, Chad, this is like a hand-picked Belichick guy. Like, this guy is ascending to be one of the better players in the league, and now he might not play this season. They're putting a lot onto Christian Gonzalez at the cornerback position, which is a guy that I thought, Belichick coached up great. He was one of their best corners, and, you think he's going to be better. But, again, Bill's gone. That's my biggest issue with this team. It's like people want to keep talking about how good their defense was last year, and it's like I don't think they understand that having the greatest mind ever that coached the defense, it's going to be a big loss. Like, he's not going to be there and put them into these situations, which is what Belichick's so great at. He's so great at putting these guys into great situations where it's like, oh, we've practiced this situation 1,000 times, so we know exactly what to do in these spots. That's gone. Even if the coach they brought in is a guy who's off Belichick's tree, it's still different. Just because the guy played for him doesn't mean he's going to have the same style. So this is a team I wanted to bet through over, honestly, Chad, because I wanted to be like, you know what? They're not going to be as bad as people perceive. But as the more I dug into it, even if they've drafted these 2 really good wide receivers this upcoming season, there's still not enough there for me to build on, where you already talked about. The division's brutal and their schedule is brutal. It's just I can't find the wins there. So they right now are the number 1 team for worst record. So if you want to bet them worst record, I think it's only plus 350, which is the smallest odds you can get right now on worst team in football. That'll let you know where the bookmakers are at. They envision this team being, either number 1 or 2 pick. And that means you're going to have to make a decision on Drake May, most likely, which sounds stupid, but it's like we've seen it before, right? When Josh Rosen, the Cardinals were like, all right, we're out on this guy. They were happy to take Kyler Murray with the number 1 pick. I mean, we didn't even talk about the Eagles. They did pay Wentz all that money. And they took Hurts not even 2 years later in a draft. The Bears, the most recent example, they moved on right away. So teams are quick
Brock
to move
Purdy
on.
And
so
Trey Lance,
right. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Drake May by week 4 or 5. Even if we don't think he's ready and people don't think he's ready, they might be in the position where it's like, well, this kid coming out now is supposed to be the next big thing. We might have the number 1 pick. We got to see what we have here in Drake May, which, again, I don't totally agree with, but at the same time, they might not have a choice here. So, like, even you talking about these numbers here, it doesn't even seem surreal that they are 25 to 1 in the West Division. That's how far they have fallen, and it's all over, right? Bill's gone, Tom's gone. It's really dark days ahead for this New England team right now. So I think them having the best on odds, that number 1 pick, is not shocking. We just think it's going to be a bottom feeding year for this New England team.
Mike?
I think, to me, look, nobody talks about losing Belichick. The 6th best team in red zone defense last year, 6th best team in third down. That's going to change. That's a scheme element of the game that's controlled by not as much talent as is by scheme on third and out and in the red zone. So those numbers are going to go up. They in 6 games, they scored less than 10 points. They had the worst field goal kicker in football, and yet, they were in games. They weren't as bad as their record. They were horribly coached offensively, no mistake. But the thing that worries you most is moving forward with a young quarterback is their tackle poor. They have no offensive tackles. They signed Michael Owanu to be the right tackle, but he showed up at 380 pounds. They had to move him into guard. He's too fat. So they have no right. So the right tackle now is Calvin Anderson, who had malaria last year when he took a trip to Africa. So I don't know where that is. And then left tackle is the kid that Pittsburgh cut, Okafor. He's going to be there. They have no tackles. You can't play with no offensive line. And so, I think, look, the reason you like them in week one is because Zach Taylor's 0-4 in two of the first two games of the year, the last two seasons. So that makes all the sense in the world. I get that. He says he's changing how he's preparing his team, but there's no way the defense played 131 more plays than their offense last year. That's 2 full games. Yeah, that's a doubleheader, and so you're on the field weight. And that's with the 6th best third down defense. So think about how bad this offense is. And so I don't see it. Mayo's a first-time head coach. He's got 25 people on his coaching staff. How does he manage 25 people? He's never managed anybody in his life. Covington has never coordinated before. I think this is a mess. If I played anything, I'm going to say they're going to have the first pick of the draft. They are going to be everybody's survivor pick pretty much every week in the circuit contest, out where our studio is, that people are going to run to bet them. And for all the talk that Belichick can't be a GM, they've signed all his players back. It's funny. It's all the media, how the perception comes in.
Well, it is amazing, the Belichick hate that has happened the past 24 months. Everyone loves the Tom Brady narrative and that he was the reason. But I'll pose a different question to you. Andy Reid has now won 2 Super Bowls in a row. He's got 3 overall. He's going to stick around, I guess, for as long as he wants, or, until he realizes that he doesn't have Patrick Mahomes anymore. Do you feel like there is any chance Andy Reid takes over the mantle of best coach of all time from Bill Belichick?
Well, I think no, but because, when you're as an Eagle fan, you remember a lot of the heartache, a lot of conference championship games, a lot of some really strange game management decisions. I used to say Andy should outsource his game management to India at times when he would do some things that I wasn't sure what he was doing. But
I was going to say the running joke in Philly is Andy Reid's the best coach for 58 minutes. It's the last 2.
Yeah, and he's gotten away with it with Mahomes because you can go back to the Tampa game when they played down there, 4th, 3rd down he calls. Look, I think Andy's great, but I think Bill, that whole documentary irritates the hell out of me because I was in the building. I know what he did, right? The fact that Super Bowl winning general manager Terry Fontenot of the Atlanta Falcons says that he was not even in their top 3 candidates is a little bit of a ridiculous statement, right? You're telling me there's 4 better. Meanwhile, if you asked Andy Reid, who don't you want to compete against? Or ask Kyle Shanahan, who don't you want to compete against? I think the answer would be Belichick. And the Patriots have treated him like he didn't do anything there. And so now they're going to find out what life's like without a great coach. And I'm going to enjoy watching it. I really am.
If you're starting a team, right, you get hired tomorrow by a team and you've got to hire a head coach. Money is no object. You can go after anybody in the NFL right now. You're not going to go after Andy Reid, but of the class of coaches, which is basically anyone who's ever shaken Sean McVay's hand, who do you decide to go hire?
Well, I think to me, old school hasn't gone out of style. Andy Reid's going to play his guys in the preseason. Andy Reid has tough training camps. He's the best coach in football. Andy Reid finds ways to play the game each week differently. So this whole notion that you have to be a player-friendly coach isn't exactly how Kansas City operates their program. I mean, I would hire Bill because I would get the best defensive coach. I'm going to have great team toughness. I need that. You can't be a team like Miami without toughness. Mike McDaniel's great for the media, but he's 4-10 over the last second half of the season. There's no toughness to that team. There's no I'm going to punch you in the mouth. Football's a game of punching you in the mouth. So I would do that. But we've become a softer, gentler league. Well, I worked for Bill Walsh. When we went to practice at Rockland in 100-degree heat at 8:30 in the morning, we didn't walk off that field to 11:30. And we had an afternoon practice that was a walkthrough with special teams, or it was a special teams. I mean, it was hard. It was grueling. That's what the NFL is. It's a grueling marathon. And John Harbaugh knows that. That's why I think the Chargers are going to be better, because Jim Harbaugh is going to give them toughness. So I want somebody who can develop talent and who's going to give a team a toughness and who can be a strategist. I mean, how many times do you want to watch a coach? Nick Sirianni's going berserk on the sideline. I don't want that. I want a chess player. I want somebody's thinking. I want somebody like Belichick who's watching Seattle's sideline and he sees Pete Carroll and they're not organized and he doesn't call timeout, even though I'm up in the booth screaming for him to call timeout. And he blocks me out and he says, something's not right. And we intercept and win the Super Bowl.
By the way, that is one of the greatest clips from NFL films where everybody is begging him to call timeout and he sees that something isn't right and he decides not to do it. Simon, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the pick.
Oh, so good. So good. Lombardi, listen, GM Shuffle is amazing. You've written a book years ago. I remember you sent it to me. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Great insight. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
As a reminder, the favorites. What's that, buddy?
Thanks for having me. I'll keep listening all year. Don't worry.
I love it. As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day, they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays. And they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Simon and I will be back with our next episode of The Favorites on the Action Network YouTube page Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern, to talk NFC East with special guest Ross Tucker. Download us from Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your pods. Rate, review, subscribe, leave us 5 stars, say whatever you want. Feedback is a gift. Till next time, love you.